There's so much noise in our world these days. Separate groups demanding our attention to vote this way or that. Do you get those texts in all caps? This election has divided us into enemy camps, even among those whom we call brother or sister. We saturate ourselves in our echo chambers so that we have no space for the other, no ability to listen or understand those who differ from us. We hear bad news from both sides of the spectrum. Doom and gloom will be the end unless our side wins. So where's the good news? Where is God in this confusion? We are all here today because we acknowledge and celebrate that there is good news, great news. This service of Eucharist celebrates that God in Christ has done everything to end all things well. It is here that we sing in one voice and drink from one cup. Jesus' long road to the cross ensured that God has defeated death forever and love prevails. So who do we listen to? What do we listen to as followers of Christ? Will we choose to listen to those voices of discouragement and fear, or those voices of hope and encouragement? Who are we to be and what are we to do in this world at this time? We've been traveling with Jesus in the Gospel of Mark over the past many weeks as he's been walking to his death in Jerusalem. He's clear about where he is going and why. He calls people to pick up their crosses and follow him. We've watched, haven't we, where his closest disciples take one tiny step forward and several steps back in trying to understand what it means to follow Jesus. And today, we get the final story in this travel narrative. In the Gospel of Mark, this story of a blind beggar is the ultimate example of what a follower of Christ is like. And there's so much that we can learn from him. So the story begins on a dusty road just outside of Jericho. Jesus is traveling with his closest friends, and a great crowd is following them. And there's a man, a blind man, sitting by the side of the road, begging. There he was, on the margins of the excitement, hiding beneath his cloak, hoping that someone would just toss him a coin. But one thing we know about many people who have lost one sense, their other senses are heightened, more finely tuned. And this man has been listening. Word has gotten out about Jesus. People have been talking about this rabbi feeding thousands, casting out demons, and even healing the blind, giving them sight. With every story, I like to imagine this light of hope growing in the chest of Bartimaeus. Perhaps he thought, those people were given sight. I wonder if I too might be healed. This is how hope works, isn't it? We sit in our hopeless situations and someone comes along and says, God set me free. And we begin to hope the same might be true for us. It's like if you're an Aggie and you've been sitting in despair for years, and in the second half, the team changes and becomes great, and you think maybe we will beat Texas this year. You know, I have spent a lot of time with a lot of suffering people. People who are suffering with deep grief, with addictions. People that talk about how they just can't get free. And sometimes people hit bottom and they drag themselves to a meeting or to a small group somewhere where there's people that might understand. And they begin to hear stories of a new freedom, stories of healing and happiness, stories of how the power of God did for them what they could not do for themselves. And hope begins to grow stronger and stronger with each gathering. They learn to listen to good news, news of hope, news of surrender to the God who loves them and has the power to change them. It was hope that caused Bartimaeus to begin yelling out for mercy when he heard Jesus was passing by. It was this hope that kept him from listening to the voices that wanted to silence him and discourage him, the voices that said, he does not matter. Jesus does not care. But Jesus heard him and he stopped. I love in this story how Jesus does not walk up to the man. Instead, he told others to call him to come. You see, Jesus wants us all to come near to him, but he often calls us through other people. Maybe he wanted Bartimaeus to hear words of encouragement from those who just before were trying to silence him. But imagine hearing those words, take heart, get up. He is calling you. Good news spoken to a person in need. Speaking these words is the work of the church. This is our message to the world. Take heart, get up. He's calling you. And Bartimaeus, he got up. He got up and we're told he threw off his cloak, that heavy cloak that probably felt protective, that kept people from touching him, that helped him feel safe. He threw it off and ran to Jesus. Some of the things we think are protecting us keep us from freely running to Jesus. Sometimes it takes vulnerability to show who we really are under our cloaks of pretense. I wonder what cloaks you might need to shed so that you can call out for God's mercy. For me, I want people to think I have everything together, that I don't need help. But the truth is, I do need help often. I don't know how to solve all the problems that I face. I can't clearly see the way forward, and I need others to remind me of the way to Jesus. Pride and self-sufficiency are a cloak that I'm learning to shed. Bartimaeus came to Jesus, and Jesus asked him, "What do you want me to do for you?" And Bartimaeus replied, "Rabbi, let me recover my sight." This was the desire of this blind man's heart. He wanted to see again. What is the deepest desire of your heart? What would you say to Jesus if he was standing before you, asking, "What do you want me to do for you?" Where are you sitting by the side of the road, powerless to be the person you know God created you to be? What mercy do you need? We all have our things, the places in our lives that we are ashamed of, the compulsions and the fears that control us, the attitudes that we don't like, but we seem to return to them over and over. We may be powerless over all those things, but God has all power. Jesus heals people and he sets us free. Bartimaeus was sitting in the dust, but he was listening. He was listening to the good news about Jesus. His hope grew into faith, and he was able to run to Jesus for healing, and his faith made him well. Jesus instructed Bartimaeus, "Go your way. Go your way." Jesus healed him, and so he followed Jesus on his way. You see, Jesus' way was the only way for Bartimaeus. This blind beggar got it, and he becomes the perfect example of what it means to be a follower of Christ. It's not until we recognize ourselves sitting beside the road as a beggar in need of mercy and healing that we can truly be a grateful follower of Christ. In this stewardship season, St. John the Divine is challenging us to express our gratitude to God through giving to the church. As we listen to the one who hears us, who calls us, who heals us, who sends us out, our gratitude will grow. See, giving is what followers of Jesus do. This church, the church, has good news for this troubled world. The world needs to hear the message, "Take heart, Jesus is calling you." When we give generously to the church, that message will keep going out. People will be able to come here and see the unity and love in this place. Different people all loving each other. Church is the place we gather in small groups, a place where we can be vulnerable to each other. It's the place we hear each other's stories about how God's love has touched us, and our hope and our faith can grow. Through our outreach into the city, people sitting on the margins of society will know that someone sees them and that they matter to God. With so much bad news in our culture today, let us do all we can to keep the good news of Jesus available to all.